In the Oscar race for Best Picture, the experts at Gold Derby say that Dunkirk is way out front. 11 of our 24 experts are predicting that. But here we have the editorial team, the core Derbyites. Let's all of us reflect on the predictions of them and ourselves, and let's start with Marcus and Daniel, who are both saying that Dunkirk is out front. It's been out front. Is that just a placeholder for you guys, or do you really think it's out front to win? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I think it's not a placeholder for me. I didn't see it until late, but even before I got to see it, and it kind of confirmed what I thought that it was a contender. It makes sense to me. It came out early in the year, so that's for Oscar standards, it came out in the fall or in the summer, which is a little early. But Christopher Nolan has the Oscar IOU. It's a war movie. It's going to have tons of nominations below the line. It could have an acting nomination for Mark Rylance, and it just feels like it ticks a lot of the right boxes this year.
Marcus, you next.
Oscar voters love a good war movie, and this is a good war movie. It's been a while since one has won. I mean, The Hurt Locker won 8 years ago. The English Patient was before that. So it's been a while, and if I'm waiting to see The Post, I haven't seen that yet. If it's great, I'm going to switch to The Post. If it's not great, I'm going to keep Dunkirk. But one thing I'm worried about Dunkirk is it has a lack of female presence in the film. It's a very male-centric movie. I wonder if that may hurt it this year with so much female empowerment going on in the world.
That's very interesting. And I think a lot of what you're basing your predictions on, you guys, is the fact that you're using the logic of let's isolate a director first and work backward. He certainly is somebody who is grossly overdue to win an Oscar. But Paul, you've got Guillermo del Toro for Shape of Water, and I think that could actually happen. But what I want you to expound on here is if you use that Christopher Nolan logic, and let's say he does go all the way to win. In the last so many years, Best Picture has not won Best Director. La La.
No, it's at four of five, and the only time it did was with Inarritu and Birdman. And I think that if you're going to talk about an overdue director, it would be Guillermo del Toro for Shape of Water. I mean, Pan's Labyrinth, the Academy really embraced. I mean, the director's branch is. The Academy has never nominated Christopher Nolan, so maybe he gets the directing prize. I think that the reason that I am so enthused about Shape of Water is really because of the new paradigm we're under with the much more expanded Academy. 2,000 new members in the last 4 years, many international members, many more. So I think that they'll embrace a film like Shape of Water, which is European in its sensibility. And I think, Marcus, you've put into words what I guess I was just feeling about that idea of that Shape of Water. I mean, with this really powerful performance by Sally Hawkins and in the lead, and also Octavia Spencer, of this woman-driven film in a way. Those are all the reasons I'm embracing it. And I do think that Dunkirk, really the IMAX element of it, that larger than life film. But I'm not sure how many of Academy members saw it that way, and I'm not sure that film will play well on a screener like its companion, Darkest Hour, which sort of is the human story of the Dunkirk's the epic version, and Darkest Hour is the character study that telling the same sort of event. I think that film will play much better on a screener. I think Dunkirk really is the visual. Is what's so overwhelming in it, so.
Well, the last female perspective movie to win Best Picture is $1 Million Baby, and that was as macho as you get. It's the challenge that Shape of Water has going all the way is the guy problem and the steak eaters. Are they going to go for it? On the other hand, it really does connect powerfully and emotionally with people. I saw it at the Toronto Film Festival at the gala debut. The theater went nuts, exploding with just joy over this movie. And it but it's full of fantasy elements. On the other hand, Birdman was too, and it managed to win. Lord of the Rings managed to win. Some of these old rules, now that we have a different voter electorate base, as Paul's saying, matter. Chris, you pipe in here. What's going on? You've got the post out front. Is that a placeholder?
Well, I've got the post, but nobody's seen a frame of that outside of the people that were working on it. Have we ever had a movie this late in the cycle without even a poster, without even a trailer? I know they know what they're doing, and they'll have it out in plenty of time for all of these voters and such. But because we haven't seen any of it, I can't really back up my claim there. I'll tell you the movie we haven't mentioned that Zach and I, on the way to our Halloween party the other night, I don't know if people realize, whenever any of us get together for a lunch or a party or anything, all we do is sit around doing exactly what we're doing right now. So we were talking about Best Picture possibilities, and I had not thought about this, but as I talked about it more, I thought, I could see this happening. Lady Bird could be this year's spotlight. And I say that in that the one thing I didn't listen to 2 years ago in all of these, when you get over into November, December, January, there's so many little receptions and parties and events. And everybody, I always ask an Oscar voter, what are you liking? What are you, what's impressed you this year? And 2 years ago, Marcus and I would talk about this. Every single person would say a movie, whatever that movie was. And then their second thing out of their mouth, or the third thing out of their mouth, would be Spotlight. They go, oh, and Spotlight. I wonder if Lady Bird might be that movie this year. It's uplifting, it's funny, it's charming. It's got a female perspective we just talked about. I think there could be a real push this year for Greta Gerwig, not only to get in for directing, she could certainly win for screenplay. That's a movie that could do really well at Globes on the comedy side. That's going to give it some real momentum. I'm wondering if that's going to be that second and third movie out of everybody's mouth that we hear at parties that's voters.
We all liked it. It's rare that the five of us agree on a movie, and
all five of us liked a movie, and I don't know that that's happened before.
No, that's true. Let's talk about this emotional point too, because this is what's happening in this category of late, which is Lala was upset by Moonlight, of course, and Revenant was upset by Spotlight, and Boyhood was upset by Birdman. These all the odds were going the other way at Gold Derby at the time. The odds were on Lala, were on Revenant, were on Boyhood. Of those last 3 years where we've seen upsets happen at the Oscars, Moonlight and Spotlight were movies that people did love a lot. But I think the flip 3 years ago is the case where Boyhood was the movie everybody really loved. If you ask them what were they emotionally attached to, but Birdman came through and won. And that gives us conflicting tea leaves now if we're trying to figure out this tricky category, which is all the more tricky now because of the preferential ballot. And let's explain what that means. It's the fact that your number two votes in the Academy may be the ones electing this as a winner. For example, the theory goes that, well, Lala was either loved or hated by people. It's either your number one or your number five vote, because remember, you only rank 5 choices. Oh, that's for the nominations. That's true. But the same is true for Revenant. If it's that divisive movie that's at number 1 and maybe further down on your list, then Spotlight is at everyone's number 2.
It doesn't end up staying in the count. There's successive counts, and
Correct.
if your movie needs to have lots of number 1 votes to be in the running, but then it also needs to be second or third on the ballots that get discarded. And I think, to your point, La La Land wasn't on as many of those ballots as Moonlight. It was much further down. As you said, you loved or hated it, and I could see that being the case maybe with Dunkirk. That some people are like, they're respectful of it, but they're not enamored with it.
And Shape of Water and The Post. These movies can be very divisive, but Pete Hammond threw out a crazy idea the other day, maybe not so crazy, that the Little Giant Slayer might be the Florida Project. Chris and my favorite movie of the year. I'm saying that but boy, a lot of people love it, and it's and as Pete said, look, it takes place in Florida, just like Moonlight. It deals with the same subject in its essence. The lower, the downtrodden lower class at the end of their ropes, and showing them in a sympathetic way. That's an interesting idea. I don't know if it's substantial enough to go all the way. It's divisive.
But also, I mean, think about it. Think about La La Land, Moonlight, these kinds of movies by new filmmakers, right? Like Damien Chazelle, Barry Jenkins. I mean, you know, we think, oh, Steven Spielberg directing Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, that's just a slam dunk. Christopher Nolan, you know, with his track record of the Batman trilogy and Inception, you know, this new Academy is embracing new filmmakers, and I think that to, you know, and also international, and that's where I think something like Call Me by Your Name could do very well. And you know, it's a gay love story. Well, people thought, oh my God, Moonlight has no hope because, you know, the Academy rejected Brokeback Mountain, which was by a very well-respected filmmaker, but that's more than a decade ago. That's the old Academy, pre-preferential ballot. And I know, Tom, you said Call Me by Your Name, very, you know, well-made movie, very inspires a lot of passion from people that have seen it.
I would see it more possible that Call Me by Your Name could be the Little Giant Slayer movie that takes down the big front. Well, let's say it's Dunkirk as we enter the Oscars. Because remember, even on Oscar nomination day a few years ago, when Lincoln suddenly had the most nominations and everyone thought it was out front, and especially since Ben Affleck wasn't nominated, but then all of a sudden, you know, that actually turned out to be a plus. And this is where we love this whole game because it's a real race and people jump out in front and fall behind. But on that said, the preferential ballot has only been in place for a short while, and it's hard to see patterns here. In the old days, remember, it was a case of where people would say, well, we don't want to be out front because then you fall behind. The idea being, for example, let's say it was Brokeback Mountain had won, to use that example Paul just mentioned, had kept winning all the Best Picture awards. It won 26, the most in any award season ever up to that point. And then on Oscar night, it won director, it won screenplay, it won all these awards you're supposed to win for Best Picture, and of course lost to Crash. And what the old perception of that situation was, you don't want to be out front because the front runner stumbles. And that's not the case historically. The English Patient, Titanic, American Beauty, Lord of the Rings, $1 Million Baby, The Departed, The Artist. These are all movies that were out front early and stayed there the whole season. But we're looking for new patterns now. Do any of you guys think you've seen new patterns from this new preferential ballot that we can rely on?
I saw a lot of tea leaves kind of broken last year, but the one that holds is this SAG Ensemble nomination. If you get snubbed at SAG Ensemble, like La La Land did, it kind of proves that the acting branch is really not behind that film as much as some of the other films. So you should not consider that, even though La La Land won basically everything else, including the preferential ballot at the PGA Awards, if the actors are not behind you, maybe look at the second place choice or the third place choice.
And so of the films, I mean, is Dunkirk going to get a SAG Ensemble? I mean,
that's a good question. I mean,
certainly you could see Shape of Water getting one. You could see Darkest Hour. You could see, obviously, The Post.
Dunkirk had some great performances, but overall, a lot of the cast were new people, who they don't know.
Well, by that standard, Beast of No Nation got an ensemble nomination. It had two people in it. Well, it had two people in it for STAG standards, two or three cast members.
Three.
Oh, giant ensemble of three cast members in Beast of No Nation, which is, of course, they have these weird rules about who counts as an ensemble because obviously that film had more people in it. I'm not sure how many people from Dunkirk would be counted because they have a lot of people who are credited like two at a time in the end credits. And but Dunkirk is an ensemble movie. It might not be perceived that way necessarily because it's such a visual spectacle, but it certainly has enough of an ensemble character focus that I would think that if it's going to do well this season, it should get in ensemble at SAG.
I'm repeating myself, but I'm worried about the lack of female representation in that movie. I mean, look at what won SAG last year. It was Hidden Figures, and that was really telling.
I think that's true in a lot of cases. I don't think Dunkirk will get dinged for that because I don't know how you would have told this particular story with more female representation.
Yeah.
Hey, a couple of films we haven't talked about, and I'm curious, like Chris, like, Three Billboards won the audience prize at Toronto, which is slightly misleading in that it's kind of a percentage of people that saw the film. So it's not like a pure popular vote. That's kind of, people were expecting Shape of Water to win because it screened in really big venues, but in a way that hurt it. because they had to get a far greater number of people to equal the percentage that saw 3 billboards in smaller venues. But something like 3 billboards, I mean, it's Martin McDonough. It stars, you know, Frances McDormand, an Oscar winner, who I think is really strongly positioned for Best Actress. What do you think? Could that something like that come from left field?
I think so. It's in my top 10 for Best Picture. I think I've got it sort of in mid-range. It would need to take off, I think, with some of the, like a New York Film Festival or a Los Angeles, or not Film Festival, but the Critics Awards, or Los Angeles, or Board of Review, or something like that. But you can see the pathway there where it's going to be in that 5, 6, 7 Oscar nominations, because also Sam Rockwell, the screenplay. So you could potentially maybe the score. I don't have it in my top 5 at the moment.
It's my favorite movie of the year from what I've seen, and I just loved that movie. So I'm going to root for.
Marcus, that's your favorite movie of the year because it's the most recent one you saw.
And Daniel, you're a big Paul Thomas Anderson fan, I think. You know, Phantom Thread, which again, like The Post, I haven't seen the film, but at least with Phantom Thread, we've seen a trailer. Did watching that trailer make you excited for it? Did it sort of give you pause on your Dunkirk prediction?
Not particularly. I don't think I have Phantom Thread in my top 10 yet. I'm a little skeptical because I've loved Paul Thomas Anderson, especially a lot of his early work, but he's had kind of diminishing returns at the Oscars. You know, The Master got a few acting nominations. Then Inherent Vice only got, I think, screenplay and costumes. So the good news is he's got Daniel Day-Lewis. You know, the last time Paul Thomas Anderson really took off at the Oscars was There Will Be Blood, which was his biggest Oscar movie to date. So it could, but it's a kind of, it seems like smaller subject in terms of the scale, the scope of it. So I think it's definitely a contender for Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't know yet how it looks for Best Picture, but it certainly probably gives him his best chance since There Will Be Blood.
Hey,
well,
Tom, can
on this? There are a lot of rumors flying around the industry that Phantom Thread is really bad. It's just that it's a commercial movie, that it is like The Master. It's this pretentious, overwrought thing that's not going to get into the top Oscar categories. And then there are these rumors that it's a masterpiece. It's his career-defining achievement and all this. So I've not seen it, but I did meet last week with a group of people who have seen it, and they're involved in the industry. They have biased opinions, but it was interesting that in general, their reactions were split on whether or not they all agree that it will be nominated for Best Picture. Several of them said there's no way it could win. 2 people said they still thought it could win. But, of course, he's a major player to win Best Actor. What is the surprise about the movie, from what I'm hearing, is that it's got a kind of jarring ending like There Will Be Blood, where suddenly at the end, of course, Daniel Day-Lewis just becomes this bloody monster at the end of There Will Be Blood. Apparently something equivalent to that happens at the end of Phantom Blood. We don't know what. It was reputed at first to be a violent sex scene, and everyone was excited, and the rumors were flying that, oh my God, it's like 50 Shades of Grey at the Oscars. And then all of a sudden, no, it's not a sex scene. So there's all this mystery, but apparently it's got this big wallop of a finale that will be very controversial. That said, the reason I'm mentioning it in this context is don't believe the rumors that it's not a contender, that it's another Inherent Vice kind of thing. And by the way, while I'm on the subject of movies that are rebounding from bad rumors, the Denzel Washington movie, the Roman
Israel Esquire,
that is actually getting a good feedback too, not for the film itself, but for his performance, that he really is a contender. We'll talk about Best Actor in a separate conversation, but don't write it off, that it's not for Best Picture, but it is in the race.
Hey, Tom, so Daniel mentioned that SAG Ensemble nomination a couple of years ago for the Netflix movie Beasts of No Nations, and that didn't translate into any Oscar love. But do you think a couple of years on that Netflix is a serious player, especially with Mudbound, you know, directed by an African-American woman, and beyond the story, you know, which is really compelling, they don't have to worry about screeners. No. You know, they don't have to worry about subtitles with this new international element to the Academy. I mean, Netflix is in, you know, so many countries around the world. The subtitling is taken care of. They don't have to should we be taking them more seriously than I think our experts are? I mean, Mudbound is just out of the top 10.
Right, and it did well at a film festival recently. What was it?
In London. London.
Yeah.
They
London. So in other words, it's a player. A lot of people like it a lot. It seems a little quiet and sleepy to me. But on the other hand, it's resonating powerfully with critics. It is on Netflix, so it gets widely seen. So is their Meyerowitz stories, which they are not writing off as an Oscar contender. They're adamant that Netflix, that it's in the running. Yeah, they're making some bold strides here, that they're really in the game.
Let me bring up one other element. I think with a group of, let's say 9, it's never 10 anymore, but let's say 8 or 9, we're talking about a lot of lower budget or lower projected box office kind of movies. There are some big box office movies that are getting major pushes this year. I don't think they would win, but could a War for the Planet of the Apes, a Logan, a Wonder Woman, could something like that make its way into a 8 or 9 Best Picture field?
I think it's going to be Get Out if it's any of the big commercial successes. Daniel, I know we both liked Get Out a lot. What would?
Yeah, I've got Get Out nominated for picture and director at the moment. I think that's the key is going to be getting Academy members to see it and take it seriously as an Oscar movie. And we've got a brand new Academy, as we've mentioned, who might be more inclined to an out-of-the-box kind of movie like this. And I think the fact that it came out early helps it in a way, because it had the time to develop the critical acclaim and the box office success. So now there's really kind of the sense that it's one of 2017's biggest success stories. So yeah, I do think that has a good shot. I think with this new Academy, we do have a chance to potentially see a couple of other big blockbusters maybe get in, a handful below the line, and then a Best Picture nomination like a Wonder Woman or War for the Planet of the Apes. I think that's definitely possible, depending on how some of these other films that haven't been widely seen yet do this fall.
Another thing about Get Out, you talked about Netflix and just availability to see. It came out so early in the year that it's hitting HBO either this weekend or next weekend. So you talk about just suddenly being available for anybody without even having need for a screener. That's gonna help it, I think, a good bit. They are on all of these that came out earlier in the year, and we've mentioned several. I'll also throw in The Big Sick, which was for its budget, tremendous hit. All of these are getting relaunch campaigns for Globe voters, SAG voters, Academy voters. The campaigners have really learned over the years, if you do have an early success or an early, hit of some sort, you've got to do something else major in October or November, somewhere along in there, to remind people.
Well, I do know that Detroit is going to be given a big DVD push in November, that they're not writing it off, even though it was a box office disappointment. The studio was forced to release the movie in early August in timed with the anniversary of the original riots. But there are other, that could get in, because they're hoping to do the ignite its support by DVD. And that's what's making this race interesting, is this Netflix second screen experience where you can see all these things. On the Get Out thing, I just don't understand it. I liked it a lot. I think it was a hoot of a film. But a horror movie and a comedy being up for Best Picture, I'm all for it. I think it's great, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me in terms of patterns on Oscars past. But that said, wherever you go in Hollywood, whoever you ask, what a member of this guild or that critics group or the rest of it, Get Out is on everybody's list. Why? How is it getting a free pass that other movies aren't?
Well, Marcus, it's
horror.
your kind of film, Marcus. So what you explain to us why people are embracing it.
Well, Tom said that, he doesn't understand. And every year I don't understand how half of these movies get into Best Picture. Let's just admit, some of these pictures that get nominated are not that good. And Get Out had extremely great critical acclaim, and they've had a few parties already too, so that they are building up this great Oscar campaign. And like Chris said, if it's coming to HBO, that means all the voters who didn't go out and see it because they didn't think it would be an Oscar movie, all of a sudden now they're going to be watching it too.
And what else Get Out has is that, unlike most horror comedies that you could think of, it's an extremely personal film for Jordan Peele. It's very much kind of like this satire of being Black in America to a certain degree, and that I think resonates at this particular period. And with this film, to do it in a very commercial, entertaining, often funny, often scary way, it really took people by surprise. And I think the surprise and the hit factor and the acclaim factor, all of those things on its side, I think that really gives it a boost to be kind of an unconventional Oscar contender.
I like that.
Did we mention Darkest Hour?
Yeah.
We did, but didn't. Run with that a little bit, Marcus. Go ahead.
Well, I remember I was talking to you, Tom, a few weeks ago, and I said, do you think Dunkirk's winning? And you said that you could see Darkest Hour kind of upsetting. And I'm seeing it this week, so I don't want to.
When I said that to you, it was fresh off my high of seeing it, and Sasha Stone at Awards Daily had it #1, and one or two other pundits did. I think it's, and I'm not a film critic, let me underscore that. In my personal opinion, it's a better movie than Dunkirk because it's got more heart, it's more literate. It's the Dunkirk story told from a more character-driven point of view, and I think it's the kind of English patient big British movie or King's Speech that would win in the past, and it's so solid and so well made, so it's going to pull well across the categories and the branches, but I don't know if it can win. If it takes off, Paul, you shared my enthusiasm for Darkest Hour, but you were a little more skeptical with my perspective on it might be able to win, right? Where do you stand on Darkest Hour?
Oh, it's funny because it sat with me. I'm more enthusiastic about it, and it makes me. It's one of those films I definitely want to watch again. I'm looking forward to getting a screener because I think it's so well acted. But I do fear that it's kind of like if it had been made 10 years ago, it would be sort of much more of a slam dunk for Best Picture. And I'm so hung up on the new dynamic of the Academy and the new electorate, and it's extremely well made movie, but it's a movie about events that happened 75 years ago, and it could have been made 75 years ago. It's not that new perspective that you always talk about that you need to kind of break through. And I think that's where, in a way, we underestimated Moonlight versus La La Land because La La Land was sort of more traditional fare, and I think the Academy is looking for something that's more representative of the times. So that's my only fear with Darkest Hour, and quite frankly with Dunkirk. And that's where I think, again, with Shape of Water, I'll make our last pitch for that, because it does seem to sort of speak to today.
One movie we haven't talked about is the #1 movie of the year, Beauty and the Beast. It's going to win 2 Oscars, probably. Is it possible that they could nominate it for Best Picture? I mean, the original animated one was nominated.
Yeah.
It's possible.
It should get, 4, 5, 6 nominations, even without the major ones, all the technical categories like production design, costume design. I think doesn't have at least one original song. So, I mean,
visual effects and sound.
I don't know. I don't know that it. I got it in the 5 at the Globes for comedy musical, but I'm not sure beyond that. It might just be one of those movies that gets in, multiple times at the Oscars, but not Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the Post for a second here. I've got it at my #1 spot simply as a placeholder because I don't know what to think of this year. But that said, the last time that Spielberg won Best Picture was Schindler's List more than 30 years ago. He was not nominated for Best Director, even though Bridge of Spies did very well across the branches recently. He was last nominated for director with Lincoln, but his movies do get nominated. Even War Horse, which was not received well, was nominated for Best Picture. So I think we have to assume it's in there. He really delivered the Academy loved his Bridge of Spies, but and this one might resonate powerfully because it's about the Pentagon Papers. It's about a scandal at the White House against the world, and that certainly has resonance.
And journalism, which just won 2 years ago.
That's right, with Spotlight.
It feels important, like Spotlight felt important and current. And look, you have two of the most famous actors of all time playing real people, so that's going to hurt. Sorry, that's going to help.
A massive cast. I mean, is there any? I mean, if this movie's B level or better, it's got to get in at SAG Ensemble, right?
Yeah,
so that's a big plus. I will say, I think the people behind it, I think the people at the studio, and maybe him himself, really are feeling something, because this Spielberg documentary that just aired on HBO, he had never allowed that kind of access to his life, and the timing of it, airing just weeks before this new movie. It feels like to me that was on purpose, intentional. Like he timed it out. He had nothing to do with the documentary making, but just I have this feeling that somebody said, we'll do this, but we want it released in the fall, in advance of the Post coming out or something like that. It just reminds people of what an important career he's had.
But a film opening in December hasn't won in, 15 years?
$1 billion baby.
So that's something to
It's going to be all about, can they get people to, not us, not the public, can they get the Globe voters, the SAG voters, the Critics' Choice, and the reviews, can they get all of that done by, let's say, November 20th range? Silence couldn't do it last year for Martin Scorsese. That was a pretty well-reviewed movie, but they just couldn't get people to see it in time. Critics' Choice didn't see it at all before they absurdly make their nomination so early. So can they get this thing in front of the right people at an appropriate time so it doesn't miss out? Once Silence started missing stuff, it was just like a downhill boulder coming. It could not make up for that when it came to Oscar time.
Right. By the way, we have not seen All the Money in the World, the Ridley Scott movie that is about the kidnapping of John Paul Getty III. That could really be resonant with voters. It just has not been seen by any of us. Of the other movies, like The Last Showman,
The Greatest Showman.
Greatest Showman, thank you. Fox Studio admits that it's a Golden Globe picture, which is a polite way of saying yes, because of the musical numbers. Yes, it will be.
It's a musical biopic of P.T. Barnum, the circus impresario, and it's Hugh Jackman and Michelle Williams.
So it's not being considered an Oscar contender by the studio. It's rare that they actually even say that to you. I mean, it will be considered, of course, in all those crafts areas where it's a big standout. And the trailer looks fantastic, but they are saying it's more Globes than Oscars.
There's nothing wrong with being a Globe movie.
I agree. Thank you for saying that.
Well, it's just the first. We're on Monday, October 30th. This is the first of many times we'll be talking about this, and we'll be changing our minds repeatedly, and then all coming back to realize that what Tom said was right today, unless we realize it was wrong.
That said, we'll sign off right here. Thanks.